please understand that now more than ever, this is one of those make or break moments for you as a product manager, your product and your company.
Hey everyone, so we're here today to talk about how the coronavirus pandemic will be affecting product management and product management interviewing. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Ken Sandy, who is a former VP of product at both Lynda and at Masterclass. And today we're going to talk with Ken a little bit more about how to think about product management and product management interviewing. Ken is also the author of a book. Ken, can you tell us a little bit more about the book and a little bit more about your background?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'll talk quickly about the book. It's The Influential Product Manager, How to Lead and Launch Successful Technology Products. Really gets into talking about how product managers need to collaborate effectively within their organization, lead through influence, build stakeholder relationships, and how they build empathy with their customer. Very high level topics, but what I've done is really try to codify what are the behaviors and actions that you can take to be successful around those different things.
Ken, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself before we jump into this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area for longer than I want to actually admit, but I've been working in executive product management roles, a number of different companies, more recently in the education space, previously in e-commerce, in enterprise, and various platform and consumer companies. I've also worked internationally. I've worked in China, India, and I'm originally from Australia, where I am right now, in Melbourne, Australia, bunkering down during this unfortunate crisis. So that's a little bit about me. I've built many teams at different companies. I pride myself on building small high impact product management teams, and obviously a big part of that is how I think about and go about recruiting and interviewing those team members, and then really setting them up for success when they join the company.
And so just to start off with, Ken, could you tell us a little bit more about sort of how product management is responding or may respond to some of the things that are happening in the world right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been working with a couple of companies exactly on this issue, and it's interesting to sort of see how product managers are very much needing to be in the driver's seat in helping their companies think about how they respond. I'm going to start by first saying that, please understand that now more than ever, this is one of those make or break moments for you as a product manager, your product and your company, is how you treat your customers and your employees during this time. It will easily destroy your reputation or really build your reputation as a kind, caring, and thoughtful company. So working from a deeply principled place is one of those is a very important moment for you all, and as a product manager, it's just super important that you help lead your company through that. It just takes one careless action or negative customer response or an obviously self-serving initiative taking advantage of the crisis to destroy all that goodwill. So really be thoughtful about every step that you take. That said, it is an important moment to think very much about how you as a product manager really do things that change the way or break down your response into, I think, three key areas. The first is, as a product manager, what risks does this pose to your product and your company, and how do you need to adapt? That might be adapting how you work. It might be the product itself. The second thing is with all crises and changes like this, there's always that flip side of what opportunities might be presented to you. We often overlook those, but the companies or the products I think are going to do the best through this crisis are those that actually position themselves to understand how the world is going to be changed, now and sort of long term, and position themselves to effectively take advantage of those. And the third area is in terms of the ways of working, how will we need to operate differently as a team, as a go-to-market team, both when you're working with customers, but also internally. This can be any level of thinking about the way that you're working with your team and building trust during these times. It will be a highly emotional time, but also from your customer's perspective, what problems are they really struggling with, and can you help them turn to you to actually address those issues? So that's kind of how I might actually start within an interview, is structuring those three streams of areas to go deeper in, and then obviously go deeper in each of those.
Totally, that's a great breakdown. So sort of like the risks, the opportunities, and then how does it affect our operations as a team, and sort of going through this stuff. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about sort of like what are maybe in some of the products that you advise or some of the examples, can you talk a little bit more about what some of those risks, opportunities, or changes in terms of the working style that happen for some of these product teams?
Yeah, for sure. So when you think about tackling this issue, again, I want to underline, it's very important to go back to your first principles, and that is to look back and say, what is our vision? Even in a crisis, a North Star ought to guide you. That's the point of a North Star. So no matter how you structure tackling this, understand the vision of the organization and the product, and come from that direction first. The second thing is to make sure that you're coming from the customer's direction. It's very easy during a crisis to be somewhat panicked about like everything from what does this mean for the business, or what is it going to mean for sales? But a product manager, if you come from kind of the customer perspective, what are the problems that my customers running into? What are the jobs to be done? How are my customers changing the way that they work and they live? And take that direction first. And third, now more than ever is an opportunity because of the fast nature of COVID, is iteration and fast delivery, not sloppy delivery, but really trying to think about how do I iterate quickly and learn quickly is going to be super important. So here's a couple of quick examples of some of this. So when I I've worked at a number of online education companies, and we obviously believe that high quality education that really inspires and motivates people can be delivered through digital means, and that it's a great equalizer because many people do not have the same access to education. That's sort of the North Star that we're working from. Now, what's happening is across all segments of education, particularly institutional education, everyone is suddenly scrambling to figure out how to shift instruction online. So a good example, in Australia, they closed up schools early just before the Easter break to allow teachers time to prepare, and no one really knows what that even means. They don't have the tools, they don't have even the curriculum online yet. I teach at University of Cal, University of California in Berkeley, and we had next to no notice to bring a lot of our classes online, which are insanely hard because many of the classes are not lectures; they're actually hands-on project-based and lecture style. So online education companies have had an opportunity to really help a lot of these new market segments almost to bring their learning online, as are many of the tools such as like video conferencing to actually really help those organizations figure out how to do it. Now, interestingly, they're not just putting together like their platforms and the tools, but they're actually helping train those new opportunities, if you will, or those new customers in the use of these tools, and giving them a number of different tips and ways to actually roll this out quickly. So that's one. Another example that I ran into was a fintech organization with in a very highly regulated environment. A new class of loans were rapidly approved by Congress in the US, and the problem is getting access to those new loans. These are guaranteed loans to help people through these times. I forget exactly what they're called. And this company had never really used Agile or iterated or used MVPs. And this was an opportunity for the CIO to really, he saw an opportunity to help his organization learn how to do this. And they're on track for within just 1 week to have admittedly a MVP product, a very light product, launched and actually taking loans because there's such a demand there, whereas many other organizations are kind of caught flat-footed. So one example of responding during these times were actually a number of the ride-sharing apps. In some locations, you might have noticed the pool option was removed from the application, obviously with concern about having multiple people not being able to practice social distancing during their rides. Now, in some locations, it took a lot longer to remove that, and in other locations, they were a little bit quicker off the mark. In some cases, this was recognized very quickly as a good thing. In other locations where it took a little longer, there could have been a dangerously long delay, not so much actually putting people at risk, but raising questions about whether or not the company was responding appropriately to the crisis. Now, no doubt, it's a big important part of the business. They wouldn't have that feature otherwise. So obviously that was a very tough decision for the organizations to take, but it was the right decision. And in some cases, I wish they'd moved a little faster.
That's super helpful context. And I did want to touch on a little bit more of the third piece. And this is certainly a very emotional time. This is an incredible event in world history, really, right now. And, it's had a lot of impact on people and certainly on teams and team dynamic as well. So I'm curious just to hear a little bit more from your experience growing and building product teams about, in this time when we're all remote, all in our rooms being quarantined, like how can one or a product manager think about responding to this crisis from a teammate perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. Product managers need to actually overcompensate on the communication side. But at the end of the day, we need to add some structure. So I think more time on things like daily stand-ups and really making those work are really, really important. Whether or not you're actually using formal Agile or not, put that in place and make sure that everybody in the team is talking to everybody, sharing where they're at, and making sure you're surfacing where the issues are going to be. It's going to require also for individuals to spend more time building those relationships, particularly if there's new team members being introduced or there's a low trust environment. Do not underestimate things like virtual happy hours or one-to-one kind of ad hoc kind of coffee talks, all those sorts of things I've seen companies starting to roll out. Some were doing it before this, but many more are doing it now. And the value of just building those relationships pays off because people are just working from a position of everyone's in good intent. So when something goes wrong, you assume that and not something else. More structure and documentation is unfortunately also required. I think collaboration around documentation is important, but being very super clear about what decisions are being taken, and then in your head as a product manager thinking who isn't in the room and who needs to know about that. So there's just some of the things.
Totally, this is super helpful, and I'll just add that those one-on-one coffee chats, even at Exponent, we do some of that stuff, and it's just a great time because this can be a very emotional time. So as a product manager, we're great active listeners, or hopefully that's a skill that has been developed, and just checking in with coworkers and stuff like that has been really valuable. So I want to just have one last question and then sort of wrap up at the end. What interview tips do you have for people a lot of people now are remote interviewing. So their on-sites are now transitioned to a remote interview,
Mm.
which can definitely be a disappointment for both the interviewer and the interviewee. But given this state, do you have any tips for remote product management interviewing in general?
Well, for sure. It might sound a little simplistic, but take the interview as seriously as you would as if you were turning up and sitting down in front of the person. It is insanely easy to get distracted by having an electronic interface in front of you. Switch off everything. Switch off Slack, switch off email, put away your phone. My phone right now for this is in the other room. I refuse to be just distracted. Make sure that you are 100% present during the interview. It will be noticed. Number two, it is now going to be more important that you prepare even more. So really do that deep research. Having a kind of a informal chat is not going to cut it. I've done a lot of remote interviewing, by the way. There was times where I was literally hiring people when I was in another country, and our very first interview phone screen would be via video conference. And every time it was really clear when someone had really thought about what questions they wanted to ask me, how they had thought about the role and their contribution to the company, not unlike what you would pick up in an in-person interview, but it became even more important that in that first 5 minutes, I thought to myself as the interviewer, wow, this is a person asking amazingly good questions and super engaging me, even more important. You were not going to get some of the natural body feedback clues, that kind of things to say whether or not you're doing well. It's probably not. You probably don't want to ask that, so it's probably important for you to look for the cues, but to assume that you can't let your guard down too much. But then again, be yourself. That's what they're wanting to see. So don't be someone different than you would otherwise be. And then finally, don't fall into the trap of thinking that personal grooming isn't going to be important. Make sure that you're very presentable and that you're thinking about that. It's just respectful.
Yeah, I've seen all those memes of people with their pants different from their top, and I feel like psychologically there's certainly an effect on your interviewing when you're not wearing the right pants or whatever for an actual job interview.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, I think the point about checking in with the interviewer is great. We actually have a lesson in Exponent's PM interview prep course on this about how active and passive check-ins, like, hey, is this going well? Like, hey, let me know if I should go in a different direction, are really effective in interviews, especially on the phone. And that sort of translates a little bit into the on-site setting, the virtual on-site setting as well.
For sure.
Okay, great. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to leave folks with before we sort of wrap up here today, Ken?
No, I think that covered a lot of things, a lot of ground. Look, this is a difficult time, but again, working from first principles and being extra empathetic at this time is going to be super important. Maybe the only other thing I will bring up is there's an opportunity at this time also, and whether you bring this up in an interview or not is up to you, but depending on what you're hiring for, if you're being hired potentially for a role that you're looking to be a change agent in that role, there's during these sorts of times it does actually there is an opportunity to challenge things that maybe have gone unchallenged in the past because there's perhaps more anxiety about like funding or runway or revenues or the team size, or maybe they're clamping down on hiring. Those things are all happening for sure. So as a product leader, this is a time to say, do we need greater focus, maybe greater simplicity around our products? Maybe we need to reset some of our goals. Maybe we need fewer goals. Maybe looking critically at some of the old ways of working or customer segments that maybe not so profitable, and really thinking about where the organization could be improved these are all on the table as well. It's your call in an interview whether you think it's something that you want to broach, but there is definitely, I think, much more openness at this point to say, okay, how do we hyper focus and really ensure that we're working on the right things? And that's always a high value thing for product managers to deliver to their organizations.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Ken, for being on the show. Again, I just wanted to remind everyone, this show, typically we do PM mock interviews, but we decided to do this lesson given what's going on in the world today. And I did want to just remind everyone that, of course, the coronavirus is affecting everyone in very different ways. And it is quite a historical event that we're experiencing. And tools and tips like social distancing and making sure that you're actually abiding by the quarantine are really, really important during this time. Again, thank you, Ken, for being on the show. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, how product management continues to shift and evolve throughout these historical events.